Hello everyone, in this video I'll be reviewing Dragon Age Absolution. But first I would like to make two disclaimers. One, for my regular viewers, I know this isn't gaming content, but it is about a gaming franchise, and I do like doing this kind of thing, so I hope you guys enjoy it and maybe I'll do it in the future. And two, since there is, a gay couple in this show, I want to say that I'm not an idiot. That's not why I don't like this show, because I've already seen stuff about that happening, but So the way I'm going to do this review is I'm going to give a short summarized version of what I think about the show in a spoiler-free section which comes first, so those who haven't watched the show don't get spoiled, and then after that I'm going to go more in-depth for those who have watched or those that just don't really care. With all that being said, let's get into the spoiler-free section. So, straight off the bat, there's only 6 episodes and they're all half an hour long, so there's only 3 hours of content. That's disappointing both for someone who wanted the show to be good and a fan of Dragon Age, but also for the quality of the show, because this does really hurt it. So let's talk about the characters, because they really only fall into 2 categories, one being bad and the other being underdeveloped. Now, the bad characters, unfortunately, are the main villain, the main protagonist, and the main protagonist's love interest. Now, this is spoiler-free, so I can't go too in-depth in this part, but basically the main character is her trauma. It's the only part of her character. She doesn't have any real redeeming qualities, really, besides maybe the love story, but it's not very well written. So, she is, in real life you'd feel bad for her, but since it's a show, you don't really care about her character because she really is just her past. It's not very interesting. Or likable for that matter, which is really bad when she's your main character, like she's literally the picture on this video, so yeah. And then you have the main villain, which he basically has a really weird way of thinking about, like, morality, or he just lies a lot or flops around, because half the time he's like a somewhat decent, well-rounded character, and then he's just like straight up evil. Again, don't really want to go too far into it because it is the spoiler-free section, but he's just like a weird character. He doesn't really work very well, and it's kind of disappointing because he's not a very good villain, in my opinion. And the main love interest, I can't go too in-depth, of course, in the spoiler-free part, but she's very much just one thing. She's not a very complex character when it comes to morality or worldview. She's just this one thing, and it's kind of infuriating to watch. And as for the other characters, there's certain elements of them that you might like or find interesting, but again, they're underdeveloped. There's not much for them to do or say. So it's really just a case of there not being enough time, and probably something wrong with the writing team, but I don't really know about that. And as for the story, it's just kind of simple. It is a heist for a MacGuffin object that is important to the plot, and the second season that is going to come out eventually, I guess. There's not much going on there. The only other part is to do with the edgy kind of dark backstory of the main character, and that's really it. There's not much going on, and I think that's also a problem, but I also think that has to do with the short amount of time that there actually is for the show. That being said, if there's one thing I would say that's good about it, well, the animation and art style are very good, and the voice acting it's pretty decent. There's nothing really wrong with it. It's good. But so if you're gonna watch it, I would say watch it for the animation, because it looks quite nice, but don't watch it to get invested in these characters. Just play the games if you haven't, or if you'd like any other recommendations for stuff, watch Castlevania or something like that. It's pretty good, also based on a video game thing, also on Netflix. So there's some good stuff that's come out of this, but this is definitely not like a great video game adaptation. It's really just okay. I say disappointing instead of awful because it's not the worst it could have been, It's just nowhere near as good as the writing for the games and the bioware team. So personally, I would say it's like a 5 or 4.5 out of 10. It's mediocre. It's okay. It has some decent elements, especially in the animation department, but it's nowhere near as good as it could have been, and it's not a great show. Now for the in-depth review. So, considering many of you may have skipped the spoiler-free section because you've already seen the show, or you don't really mind, I'll just go over this really quickly again. There's only 6 episodes, and they only amount to 3 hours of content, and this is really bad for the show. It kills the characterization, and it makes the story more simple, I think. Basically, these characters, you don't care about them. I mean, I certainly didn't. You know, there's not much room for any kind of exploration of their characters, or really motivation for a lot of the characters. And the characters that we get the most time on are annoying. They're not well written, and they're not very good characters in general. And I'll just go over that now. So, we'll start out with our main character, Miriam, and what I don't like about her, essentially, is that her entire character is her backstory and trauma. She doesn't have any redeeming traits, really. The only thing that is even close to it is her relationship with Hira, her love interest, but, you know, it's kind of brief all the time. I don't think it really works very well, so you're kind of just left with a character who is angry at everyone for what happened in her past, and it's understandable from a perspective of how she might actually be, but it's not enjoyable to watch, and it doesn't really make me like her. Obviously, in real life, you'd feel sympathy for someone who was an actual slave, but in the context of characterization, it's just like, oh, she's upset at everyone, and why do I really want to like her at all? She is just that, really. She's just an edgy kind of character. And obviously, we know that Rosarin is a bad guy, but the thing is that she totally dismisses outright the idea of being important in Tevinter, and, you know, actually being able to help the elves and getting her brother back. She doesn't think about it for a second. She also kind of blames him in, like, a weird way. Like, it was her mother who enslaved her, and he did grow up as, like, her brother, and obviously we learn that he still kind of sees them as slaves anyway, but the whole way that it comes off is just like, she's kind of blaming the person who was also in a traumatic event for the trauma that the parents put on them. But, you know, his character is really annoying anyway, so we'll get onto that in a bit. One more thing I'd like to add is her weird position when it comes to her brother coming back, because obviously she thought that, you know, he wasn't there at all, it was just a demon, there was no way to get him back, and, you know, they almost do, and she doesn't want that. Like, maybe it was just because she thought that he would still be a slave for him, but she could have always gotten him out. I mean, they end up defeating him anyway, so it's like, just, you know, you could have had another character, maybe it would be interesting, but no, he's just gone, and that doesn't matter. Okay, Rosarin, probably my least favourite character because how inconsistent he is and how annoying his characterization is. So, essentially, he offers Miriam and Neb the opportunity to be his second in command and actually help the elves, according to himself, when he becomes the leader of the Tevinter, which is his ultimate goal, right? But then he kind of, like, says that he wants them to be slaves, kind of, like, he brings up slaves multiple times in, like, a way of them being like that, and it's weird. He's also a blood mage, right? But nothing interesting is done there. He's just kind of evil, and it's annoying because a lot of the time he shows an element of himself that he's, like, kind of like a good guy, and then he's just an evil person, and it's not like it's some really cool, complex character. It's just kind of floppy and inconsistent. I'm not saying that someone's morality couldn't be so twisted that he loves them and he wants his family, because that is his second main goal, right? He just wants his family back, but he also thinks of them as lesser than him. And I'm not saying it couldn't happen, it probably has happened in real life, but it's just really annoying, and I don't think it works as villain motivation. Like, what do they want me to feel? Like, should I feel weird for liking him at some points, or should I never have liked him? I don't get it, you know? And then he dies in the last episode, and their whole relationship, Miriam, it's all gone. You know, her whole backstory doesn't matter. It's been cleared up in the first season, and now they're going to try to get the MacGuffin item back. It's whatever. He also says in the second episode that he wants to try to use the circulum to, like, without killing anyone, or without using blood, but he just gives up on that when the spirit says that it's not really something you can do instead of trying. So it's like, is he actually a good guy? Is he just lying to people? like, it's just weird. I don't really get him, and he feels like a really silly villain, and I just don't think he works, in all honesty. Hira is just kind of a one-note character. She's basically an extremist terrorist who wants all of Tevinter to go away because she got fucked up by them, and it's just like, okay, it's not interesting or complex. It's technically realistic, you know, there are definitely some crazy people out there, but it's not interesting. Her only other trait is that she is in love with Mira, but it's just whatever, you know. She's a whatever character. She's one note. She's just kind of evil-ish. She doesn't care who she hurts, and that's her whole character, really. It's just whatever. It's all for a shit twist that is just, you know, plugging the second season. I really don't think that she's a good character. Another thing I'd like to mention about her is that she seems really unself-aware about the fact that she's Tevinter. She mentions it, it's part of her backstory, her family was Tevinter, right? But she wants good and bad Tevinter people to suffer, and that's exactly what happened to her. She doesn't realize that. It's just really weird. Like, obviously, culturally, I guess she's kind of different because she doesn't want else to be slave, and she doesn't agree with a lot of the stuff that they do, but at the same time, it's her heritage, and since she grew up in it, it has to be at least somewhat her culture, but she doesn't see that as a problem. Like, you know what I mean? It doesn't seem like she hates herself for that, and she also doesn't see that it's kind of stupid to want to destroy an entire empire based on, you know, the ideals of some. It's just whatever. Like, she acknowledges that there are good people in Tevinter, and that would have included herself and her family, but she doesn't care. She's so driven by the stupidest kind of revenge, where instead of doing it to the people who actually wronged you, you do it to everyone who could have possibly been connected in any kind of way. It's really bad, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Her motivations are awful. So, Lachlan is just kind of selfish and greedy. He only went on this for money, yet he follows them into all of these dangerous situations anyway. He loves Roland, that's about it. Their relationship is fine. I mean, they do kind of allude to it. There's like a whole, like, flirty thing throughout the whole show, but it's not super interesting. Roland is a decent character. He is, you know, really good friends with Miriam, and he seems to have like a high morality kind of thing. But again, none of this is really well built up in either of the characters because they're minor characters, and there's 3 hours of, you know, content. Fairbanks is kind of whatever. He was in the game Dragon Age Inquisition, and he works for what's left of the Inquisition, but he's really just there to help with the reveal of Hira later on, so he's not really super important. Tarsia is not particularly interesting either. She just loves Rosarin. You know, she's a Templar, so, you know, there's that whole magic thing going on. And she doesn't like the fact he does blood magic. At the end, she realizes that he does, like, properly, and she's very disappointed in him. And that's about it, really. She's not super interesting or important. Time to talk about my favourite character, and probably the fan favourite of the show, just based on what I've seen online. Her name is Quidium, and she's funny, charismatic, and heroic at times, and she's pretty likable, although there's not much going on there, because again, 6-episode show, so yeah. The one thing that I would say that I didn't like about her is that she doesn't really care when the dragon escapes. None of them really do, though, but she's the one that let it go. Obviously, she likes it and thinks dragons get a bad rap because she's been Tari and everything, and that's a part of the games, but, you know, it's just something that I don't like about any of the characters in that part, but particularly her because she's the one that let it go. It's going to cause serious damage, and, you know, they don't even know how far it's going to go. It could go into, not to Vinterland as well, you know, so it's just, like, kind of weird, but hey, whatever. They played that whole thing off as a joke, so whatever, I guess. She's a decent character. One more thing I'll say about the characters is it feels like Quidium and Lachlan don't have much reason to be doing all these heroic things, like trying to save Hera, and at the end they want to get the Circulum back, and they do say it could be worth more now, but, like, the thing is that it is incredibly dangerous, and I feel like since they got out of that situation pretty well, they'd both want to get out. The thing about Quidium is that when she was being heroic, like, standing up for those elves, it was like, reluctantly, and at the beginning she says that she uses her magic wherever she can get paid the most, so it feels like both of them should leave. I mean, technically Lachlan does love Roland, so maybe he's staying for him more than the actual money, but the thing is that they could leave, the two of them, and do a less dangerous job for money quicker. So, I don't know, it just feels a bit odd, to be honest. And ultimately, this is why I said it was a disappointment, because the writing for the characters in any BioWare thing, except for fucking Anthem, because we don't talk about Anthem, right? Does that even fucking have characters? Who knows? No one played it. But basically what I'm trying to say is that the characters in BioWare things are made so well. I've played Mass Effect and Dragon Age. They're so good, they're so likable and interesting, and hell, even your characters, which, you know, the voice, there's a couple voice options, but they're all customizable, yet you can have so much character in them anyway, and that's so cool. You know, the characterization in BioWare RPGs is like the best fucking part, and it's really sad and disappointing that the show is lacking that. Obviously, it's nowhere near the same amount of time, because it's 6 hours, but still, I think it's just really sad, because when I think about Dragon Age, I think about really well-written and likable characters, and that's just not what this is. So that's why I think, when it comes to characterization, this show is really disappointing, not only for your average viewer, but especially for a fan of BioWare and Dragon Age. Okay, let's talk about the plot. For me, the plot was pretty simple, should have and could have been more in-depth, but there was only 6 episodes, so I digress. The first 2 episodes are conceptually enjoyable, if not basic, because it's just like a heist movie kind of deal. The rest about the Circulum and Miriam's relationship with Razarin is just whatever. It's kind of just like edgy and dark, I think. And honestly, she blames him for stuff that isn't really his fault, like Neb, due to the harrowing and stuff. So, you know, personally I don't think it's very good. The end is probably my least favourite, because Razarin dies and Neb doesn't come back, and it all just sets up the sequel season, and I don't really care about Hera and that organization as villains. Obviously we know there's going to be the Red Lithium stuff going on, but I'm not like super excited for any of that. So personally, I think the story could have been a lot better, and I'm honestly pretty disappointed with the entire show and BioWare's influence on it, because obviously they didn't write the entire thing, but they definitely had influence, you know? So, considering the stuff that they've done before, it's kind of disappointing, and I would rate this like a 5 or 4.5, you know? It's not awful, it's not terrible, but it's definitely mediocre, and it could have been a lot better. Obviously, these are just my opinions, so I would really appreciate it if you guys said what you thought about the show, or the characters, or if I've said anything that you think is wrong, or I've made any kind of slight mistake, please let me know. If I was to give the show any props, I would say the art style, animation, and voice acting are all quite solid. If I was to say to watch this show, I would say watch it for the artistry visually, not conceptually. You know, look at it like a painting, not a book, because I don't think you'll be very invested in the story or the characters. But that has been my review of Dragon Age Absolution, and I hope you all enjoyed. And I will leave you with this: if you haven't played the games, and you've only seen the show on Netflix, or only ever heard of the show, or never heard of any of this, right? Please check out the games, particularly Dragon Age Origins and Inquisition, because I believe they are the best games. Inquisition would also give you some more insight onto the show, because it's set just after that. So, besides that, I would say check out Dota Dragon's Blood, Castlevania, and Cuphead. One of those is not like the others when it comes to tone, but they're all good Netflix shows that have been adapted from video game series. With all that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. I've been Sweet Tripod. Remember to like and subscribe, and also comment about what you thought about the video, any positive feedback or negative about the review, because this is my first review I've ever done. It was unscripted, so it's a bit more off the cuff kind of thing. It's not perfect, there's some and ers in there, but I'd like to know what you guys thought. I'd also like to know what you thought about my opinions on the show, and any recommendations. I should do for other reviews, or just how to improve. For all my regular viewers, there are gaming related videos coming soon. I'm just working on them, and I'll see you in the next one.